big shout out to Bobby and Kyla for arranging this magnificent space. It looks great. I'm glad Andrew Yang is running for president. Our country needs a new generation of leadership. A leader who puts people first. A leader who understands how technology has transformed our economy and how to make that work for all Americans. Our future will be more secure and more productive if Andrew Yang is in the White House. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the next President of the United States, Andrew Yang.
I know it does not feel that way. You're just living your lives, checking out the presidential candidates who've come through. But I have done the math. Do you know how many Californians each island is worth? 1,000 Californians each. That's right. So if you look around this room today, how many of us are there? I'm going to give a Trumpian estimate. There are 1,700 people here in this room. It's the biggest room anyone has ever seen. I think there are legitimately about 100. So 120 people here today. 120 Iowans would be 3 football stadiums full of Californians. That's the power that you all have. It's the power to change the future of this country. The question is, how are you going to use this power on February 3rd? Most all of you know I'm not a professional politician. I'm an entrepreneur and problem solver, and I'm here to solve the problem that we've been grappling with for the last few years, yet still don't have a clear understanding of. And that problem, that question is this: why is Donald Trump our president? Really think about that for a second. Or more profound and close to home, why did Donald Trump win Iowa, the purplest of purple states, by almost 10 points? If you were to turn on cable news at any point in the last several years, why would you think Donald Trump is our president today? Turnout? DNC/Bernie Hillary-shism. Fear.
Jobs.
Lies. Racism. Anger. TV. Media. Russia, emails, Facebook, FBI, all sort of mixed together, right? Sort of like here's this potpourri as to why Trump is our president. But if you become a numbers guy, I went looking through the numbers for an explanation, and I found it. We automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years. And where were those jobs primarily located? Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and 40,000 right here in Iowa. I have been to those towns, just as you have, and after the manufacturing jobs dried up, the shopping district closed, people left, the school shrank, and that community has never recovered. I spent the last 7 years helping to create thousands of jobs in the Midwest, and I saw the same pattern play out in communities in Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, Western Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, what happened to those manufacturing jobs is now shifting to other parts of the economy. How many of you have noticed stores closing right where you work and live here in Dubuque? And why are those stores closing? Amazon, that's right. Amazon is soaking up $20 billion in business every year, closing 30% of our stores and malls. Most common job in the economy is retail clerk. The average retail clerk is a 39-year-old woman making between $8 and $12 an hour. What is her next job after the store closes? How much did Amazon pay in federal taxes last year? 0. That is the math. Dubuque, 20 billion out, 30% of your stores closed. You get 0. You've seen the changes, the fast food restaurants with the self-serve kiosks, but the changes are more pervasive than you know. When you all call the customer service line of a big company and you get a bot or software, you do the same thing I do, which is you pound 000, say human, representative, human, representative, until you get someone on the line. Raise your hand if that's what you do. Yeah, we all do that. We're like, there's a human still working at this company and I'm gonna find them. But in 2 or 3 short years, the software is going to sound like this. Hello, Andrew. How are you doing? What can I do for you? It'll be very fast, seamless, efficient. What will that mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers right now making between $10 and $14 an hour?
No.
I spoke to a group of 70 CEOs in New York City, and I asked them, how many of you are looking at replacing your back office clerical workers with software and AI? Guess how many hands went up out of 70?
70?
All 70, because that's their bottom line. If they can get rid of workers and replace them with software, every single one will jump at that. How many of you all know a truck driver here in Iowa? It's the most common job in 29 states. My friends in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. They say they're 98% of the way there. A robot truck just transported 20 tons of butter from California to Pennsylvania 3 weeks ago with no human intervention. Why did they choose butter for this maiden voyage? I have no idea. But if you Google robot butter truck, you will see the story. And then at the end of the route was a giant stack of pancakes. I'm kidding about the pancakes, but everything else is true. So what will these self-driving trucks mean for the 3.5 million truck drivers in our economy, or the 7 million plus Americans who work at truck stops, hotels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal every day? How many of you have been to Iowa 80 in Davenport? Yeah, me too. They've got a great buffet. It's really good value. They say that 5,000 people stop there every day. How many people will stop there if the trucks don't have drivers? A lot less than 5,000. I mean, we might stop there, so it might go down to 2,000 or 3,000. We're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the 4th Industrial Revolution. Chances are you've never even heard the term 4th Industrial Revolution until just now. So, this is what got me to run for president. Donald Trump wins. I react to it the same way many of you did, which is like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to take a bet on the narcissist reality TV star as president. That's not business as usual. That's like, let's figure that out. I dig through the numbers, say, okay, I get it. There's this historic economic transformation that's pushing many more Americans to the side. We're scapegoating immigrants for problems immigrants have nothing to do with. My country doesn't understand what's happening to it. And the bigger thing for me is I spent the 7 years coming in, helping create thousands of jobs around the country. I was getting accolades and awards, being like, oh, how did you do it? I got to bring my wife to meet the president, Obama, obviously. Just to be clear. So my in-laws were really excited about me that week. They were like, oh, she did all right. But imagine being that guy who was getting these accolades and then realizing that your work was like pouring water into a bathtub that had a giant hole ripped in the bottom, and the water rushing out was just getting stronger and faster, and for whatever reason, no one seemed to be talking about it. So I went in 2017 to our leaders in Washington, D.C. I said, what are we going to do to help our people manage this transition? And what do you think the folks in D.C. said to me when I said, what are we going to do to help our people manage the 4th Industrial Revolution?
Nothing.
She said it's their problem. At another event, someone made that like that Scooby-Doo, I don't know, Shaggy. The 3 answers I got out of DC were these. Number 1, we cannot talk about this, Andrew. Number 2, we should study this further. And number 3, you heard this one. We must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. How many of you have ever heard a politician say something like that? Now that sounds sort of responsible, but I'm the numbers guy, and I said, look, I looked at the studies. Do you all want to guess how effective the government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest? You know it's low, because I'm anchoring it low. But you also know it's low because you know human beings. You know if you have 500 manufacturing workers who lose their jobs, they don't all march out and be like, I'm here for my coding program now. I'll be coding in no time. No, that's not the way we operate. The success rates of these programs were between 0 and 15%. They were more or less a total failure. Almost half of the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs left the workforce and never worked again. Of that group, almost half filed for disability. You then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses in these communities to the point that America's life expectancy has now declined for the last 3 years in a row. You know the last time America's life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row? World War II is a good guess, Great Depression is a good guess, and Spanish flu 100 years ago is right. Global pandemic that killed millions in 1918. You have to go back 100 years. Because it's highly unusual for life expectancy to ever decline in a developed country. It ordinarily goes up because you're getting richer, stronger, healthier. But in the US, it's gone down and then down and then down again. So when I said this to the folks in DC, one of them said, well, I guess we'll get better at the retraining program. And another said something that brought me here to you all this morning. Said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here in DC will do anything about this because fundamentally this is a town of followers, not leaders. Can you believe he said this to me? Yeah, you actually do believe it.
Yep.
And he said the only way we would do anything about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge accepted. I'll be back in 2 years. So that was 2 years ago. I've been here to Iowa every month for the last 2 years. This particular trip is like a 17-day bus tour. My wife, my kids are here. So this is like the longest, most fun trip. Because we certainly didn't have a bus on the first trip, I'll tell you that. I've been coming every month and every time. You know, the message has been getting to more and more people. The energy around this campaign has been rising and rising. To a point where now, I'm fifth in the polls to be the Democratic nominee. We raised $16.5 million last quarter in increments of only $35 each. So my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. But there's zero corporate PAC money. This is purely a campaign of the people to take back our government and get it working for us again. So how are we going to rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy so that they actually work for us, they work for you, your families, as opposed to the big corporates that are currently in charge? How many of you are here in part because you saw a TV ad with my face on it? Oh, please raise your hand because we spent a lot of money on those ads. And I'll be very disappointed. Oh good, thank you. It's like throwing me a bone. So if you've seen the ads or seen the messaging around the campaign, you know that I want to give every American $1,000 a month. And I know the first time you saw that, you were like, that's impossible, that's a gimmick, that's too good to be true. But this is not my idea and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of the country, called it the Citizens Dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King, whose birthday we celebrated on Monday, fought for this in the 1960s, the guaranteed minimum income for all Americans, and it is what he was fighting for when he was killed in 1968. I know this in part because I had the privilege of sitting with Dr. King's son in Atlanta, who said this is what his dad was fighting for. I have to say, the most fascinating part of that conversation was when he actually just called Martin Luther King dad. And I was like, Martin Luther King is your dad? That's like, Martin Luther King III, I guess that makes perfect sense. 1,000 economists endorsed this plan in the 1960s, including Milton Friedman, one of the forefathers of modern economics. So mainstream, it passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon. It's called the Family Assistance Plan. And then 11 years later, one state passed the dividend, where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? And how do they pay for it? And what is the oil of the 21st century? Data, technology, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A study just came out that said that our data is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? So if your data is now worth billions of dollars a year, and you are not getting any of it, then who is getting all of it?
Google?
Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and the trillion-dollar tech companies that are paying zero or near zero in taxes. You see, that is the game. The feeling you have that your community is getting sucked dry progressively is because you are being depleted. And this is what we have to change. This is why we're here today this morning, is to rewrite the rules of the economy so that the value comes back to you. So Amazon, this trillion-dollar tech company, pays zero in taxes, less than everyone here in this room. Whose fault is that?
Ours?
Yeah, is it their fault? No, it's our fault, or it's our government's fault. Our government must be really asleep at the switch to say that's appropriate. We know that Amazon should be paying much more in taxes, and then the next question is, what the heck do we do with that value? If we get our tiny fair share of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, eventually every robot truck mile and AI work unit, we can easily afford $1,000 for every American adult, particularly because after this money is in your hands, where would you spend it? Like where would it go? How much of it would stay right here in Iowa? Most of it. Not all of it. You might get your own Netflix password. But most of it would go to car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses, Little League signups, local nonprofits, religious organizations. This is the trickle-up economy from our people, our families, and our communities up. This would actually give our kids a path forward. How many of you are parents like me and Emily? If you're a parent, you have had this sinking feeling sometime in the last number of months that we're leaving our kids a future that is less stable, less secure, less prosperous than the life that we have led. And the reason why we feel that way is because it is that way. If you were born in the United States of America in the 1940s, there was a 93% chance that you were going to do better than your parents. That's the American dream. That's what brought my family here. That's what we aspire to for our kids. But if you were born in the 1990s in this country, you're down to a 50-50 shot, and it's declining very fast. That is why Trump won. That is why Trump won Iowa by almost 10 points. That is why the parents in this room feel the way we do. Because we are leaving our kids a future that is not as bright as the one they deserve. I'm not running for president because I dreamt about being president. Trust me, these were not the conversations in the Yang household. When I was growing up, my parents weren't like, you're gonna be president someday. They were more like, you're terrible, clean your room. And my wife can vouch for this, that if she thought I was going to do this when we were dating, she would like run the other direction. I'm running for president because, like so many of you here today, I'm a parent who has seen the future that lies ahead for our kids. It is not something I'm willing to accept. We need to do better for them. They deserve better. So imagine a country where we can look our kids in the eyes and say, your country loves you, your country values you, and your country will invest in you. And when you turn 18, your senior year in high school, you start getting $1,000 a month. And we're going to have you take a financial literacy class the first semester senior year so you know what the heck to do with the money. And then for 1 month, your senior spring, we're going to send you to another part of the country to live and work just to see how other Americans live, because we know you're not learning anything senior spring anyway, so we might as well have you get some exposure. Like, this would be a totally different notion and investment in our young people. It would actually make them feel like their future is being looked out for. Right now, we're being told how great things are by our economic measurements. You've probably seen the headline. Stock market prices, record highs. GDP, record highs. Unemployment, near record lows. But at the same time, we still feel like things are actually not great where we live among our communities. If your corporate profits are up and your life expectancy is going down, which do you listen to?
The latter.
We know which one DC is listening to. DC can't even see people in life expectancy anymore. They're just following the dollars. Washington, DC today is the richest city in our country. Think about that. What do they produce?
Correct.
Somewhat unclear. Whatever their business is awfully good. Donald Trump said he wanted to drain the swamp. I want to do something a little bit different, Dubuque. I want to distribute the swamp. What do I mean by that? Why do we employ hundreds of thousands of workers in the most expensive city in the country? Why wouldn't we move some of those jobs to Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Iowa? We would save billions of dollars off the bat, and I would argue that those agencies would make better decisions because they live someplace normal as opposed to a DC bubble where they just talk to each other all the time. I'm for term limits for members of Congress. Their goal should be to go to DC, do work on our behalf, and then come home. It should not be to crouch there as long as possible, being like, ooh, I like it here, I like it here. Maybe I can stay here forever. And I know how we can pass term limits. I will be your president a year from now, and thank you for that. And then I will go to Congress and say, hey, we should pass 12-year term limits for all members of Congress, but current lawmakers are exempt. Do you think they'll pass that? Oh, they'll pass that the next day. They'll be like, we do this for the American people. Right? Because then they'd be like, oh, I'm exempt from this, like I can hang out. And then before you know it, we'd actually have a legislature that's more dynamic, more responsive, and actually answers to us at a higher level. So we have these economic indicators that are leading us the wrong direction. Robot trucks will be great for corporate profits and GDP. They will be very bad for many Americans. So how will we measure our economy in ways that would actually tell us how we're doing? And I know how wrong the economic measures are in part because of my family. My wife is at home every day with our 2 boys, one of whom is autistic. How much is her work valued at in our economic measures? Evelyn gets a 0, along with every stay-at-home parent in our country. How about caregivers taking care of ailing loved ones? That's a 0. How about volunteers and activists trying to make the community better? 0. Mentors and coaches trying to invest in the next generation? 0 almost all the time. 95% of artists. I hate to say it, I mean it's rough, but it's true. More and more local journalists. We put almost 2,000 local newspapers out of business over the last number of months because all their revenue went up to the internet. You know what doesn't function as well if you don't have local news?
Government.
Democracy. Because how the heck can you vote on what's going on in your community if no one's actually covering what's going on in your community? These are the things we claim to value most in our country, our families, our communities, our democracy, and we're allowing them to get zeroed out, one by one by one. Because at this point, the market rules all in our country. If the market says you're worth 0, you're worth 0. That's why you have otherwise reasonable people proposing things like we should turn coal miners into coders, which actually makes no sense if you think about it for a moment. The only way it would make sense is if you think the market is all powerful, and if the market thinks you're worth nothing, then we have to pretend we can turn you into something that is market friendly. See how that works? It's the same argument we make about a lot of these things around trying to treat women well in companies. It's like, oh, if you treat women well, it makes the company more money. But there should be other reasons to treat women well other than the fact that they're going to make you more money, am I right?
Preach.
So the message you have to send to the rest of the country on February 3rd is that the market does not know how much we're all worth, and that we all have intrinsic value as citizens, as shareholders of this country, and as human beings. And instead of measuring our economic progress by, and really if you think about it, it's pretty crazy. The inventor of GDP said 100 years ago, this is a terrible measurement for national well-being, we should never use it as that. And here we are 100 years later riding it off a cliff. And we pretend that corporate profits are the same as our well-being. As your president, I will actually start measuring our economy by the things that matter to us, like our health and life expectancy, our mental health and freedom from substance abuse, the proportion of Americans who can retire in quality circumstances, clean air and clean water, how our kids are doing. These are the measures that are actually most important to us. I will present the real numbers to you all every year at the State of the Union. I'll be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck at the State of the Union. So this is how we can humanize the economy, make it trickle up, and make it work for us. The fundamental message is that the machines work for us. We do not work for the machines. The economy exists to make our lives better. We do not exist to make the economy better. We've had it backwards for decades now. And when I talk to my wife about this, she says, how the heck did our country go so far afield where what was mainstream, front and center political wisdom in the 1960s all of a sudden requires the futuristic Asian man to drag back into the mainstream? And I said, I think somewhere over the last 50 years, we've been collectively convinced that we're all just market actors, that we're all just inputs into a machine, and that's just the way we think about ourselves now. It's like the brand of you, always grinding, always hustling. And the numbers show that we have record high corporate profits right now, but you know what else are record highs in the United States of America? Stress, anxiety, financial insecurity, depression, substance abuse, suicides, drug overdoses. You know what are record lows in the United States right now? Business formation among young people, marriage rates, having a kid. All the things that you associate with a thriving society are actually going off a cliff, even as corporate profits are rising. We have to line this up. We have to actually start focusing on what matters to us instead of what matters to the companies. And the only way to do that is to retake our government and make it work for us again. Donald Trump is our president today because he had a very, very simple message. He said he wanted to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response? America's already great. Remember that, Dubuque? It's been a long 3 years, I know. But it is now coming to an end. That response did not go over well for many Americans because the problems are real. We have to acknowledge the problems and their depth and severity, but then we need solutions that will actually move our country forward. What were Donald Trump's solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. Dubuque, you know we have to do the opposite of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of the 21st century, like climate change. We need to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value. I am the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you very much. Make America think harder, that's right. That is your job on February 3rd. It is your job to move this country that we love so much. Not left, not right, but forward. And I know we'll do just that. Thank you so much. And now, let's take some questions. Yeah. Who's got a mic? Who wants to run it to someone? I think Lucy's got a mic and she's arriving at someone. Oh, good.
Hi, very impressed by you and agree with you 100% on your economic comments that you've made. I have a question on another topic, however. Right across the street is a place I volunteer at. It's called the Lantern Center, and we are all volunteer teachers who teach immigrants and refugees English, and we coach them for their citizenship tests. So this is really very real to me. I see immigrants and refugees as very real people every day. And I'm wondering what you envision in handling the people who are coming to our border at the southern border of our country.
Well, first, let's give her a round of applause. I'm the son of immigrants myself. I instinctively believe that immigrants make our country stronger and more dynamic. So the question is, what do we do for the 12 million people who are here in this country, what you're doing is tremendous, because what they really need is someone to help teach them English, help get them acculturated, and help prepare them for a productive job. Right now, we need much more of that than we're getting. And so the question is, how do we actually help these 12 million plus undocumented immigrants in this country? So there are three approaches you could take. Number one is you could pretend you can deport 12 million people, which is totally ridiculous, would collapse regional economies, would be inhumane. It's a non-starter. Number two, you could do what we're doing right now, which is this gray area where you don't know who everyone is, they fear interacting with the government, you have problems when they wind up in an emergency room or in a car accident, etc. So number three is the most reasonable path, is we need to have a path to citizenship for people who are here undocumented and undocumented. This is something that Marco Rubio and other Republicans championed at various points in time before they lost their political courage. So we need to bring this back, and there are many Republicans who see this because we know that the current status quo is untenable. So to your original question of what to do with the southern border, it's a really, really rough situation because our government just doesn't have the resources to actually live up to the policies that are there. And so you end up with terrible choices, and you know the terrible choice you do not make is separate families and throw kids behind bars. I mean, that's not the choice you make. So we have to invest in the resources at our southern border so that we actually can deal with migrants in a humane way that's consistent with our values and our policies. And our government has failed at that challenge over this last number of years, actually. So this is something that I would focus on as president, but I would say that if you, as a government, can't actually deal with people in a humane way, then the right move is not to deal with them in an inhumane way. You know, like the right thing to do is accept that, okay, look, we don't have the facilities for these people, so we have to actually try and find some sort of environment that would work for them. I get very, very frustrated by our government's incapacity to do things that you would think that we could do. So what do you need at the border? You need lots of buildings. You need like essentially the equivalent of like a settlement. But our government has become very, very bad at building things. I don't know if you all noticed that. And this is one thing I can't believe Trump didn't get right. I was willing to accept Trump Bridge, Trump Highway, like Trump anything just because I thought he'd put his name on it, you know what I mean? I thought at least we get some like infrastructure out of his presidency, but we have not. And so this is something that he's left for us to do. I would actually invest real resources at the border so that we can enact our policies as written. But if you can't enact your policies as written, the right choice is not to be inhumane and un-American about it. The right answer is to actually say, like, look, we have failed in our ability to actually process this family in the right time, and so we have to find them an environment that's consistent with our values. I also want to say on a personal level, before we go to this, like, my parents met as immigrants who were graduate students at UC Berkeley. My father got his PhD in physics, and so as a kid I thought that everyone's dad had a PhD. So I went around being like, what's your dad's PhD in? And then I learned the hard way when someone was like, here's what his PhD was in. I was like, oh no, what just happened? And then when I was a little bit older, I found out my dad had generated 69 US patents for GE and IBM. And so I thought, like, wow, like that seems like a lot of money. So then I went to him, I was like, how much money do you get when you generate a patent? Then he told me like $200 or so. And I thought, well, that doesn't seem like enough. And then he said, well, I also got a salary so I could feed, house, and clothe you and your brother. So I shared this story because I feel like America got a pretty good deal where generating 69 patents for American companies, that seems like a win. And my family got a tremendous win because we got to grow up here, we got to live the American dream, create a better life for me, my brother. So that to me is the immigration story that we need to be celebrating in this country. My father grew up on a peanut farm in Asia with no floor, and now I'm running for president.
Thank you for coming to speak here today. I really appreciate it. Really been in tune with a lot of what you're proposing in your analysis of a lot of the issues that we face. My question for you is, as president, as animation becomes more prevalent in various things, how do you feel about automating certain weapon systems in the military, deploying, tanks, things that are fully autonomous, that have no human control? And then what do you think about some of the more advanced technologies, such as like active denial systems, microwave weapons, direct energy weapons? And do you think civilians should have the rights to own those weapons?
This is such a cool, specific line of questioning. So, to his question, right now the US is a country that has not signed off on insisting on human agency before lethal force is used by a system. So essentially it's like if the robot defense system wants to kill someone, we have not said that a human has to actually check and be like, yeah, killing that person is right. And someone called this like essentially like the are you willing to accept like the Terminator rule. And to me, it's very clear that if our government is going to kill someone, there has to be a human who at least looks in on the decision and is like, yes, this is the right move. So that's one thing I would say very, very early on is like, look, you need human agency with a life or death decision. It is not too much to ask. And even though we have these autonomous systems that might be faster than us, that should not be a life or death move that we then have to look at after the fact. So that's the rule there. The futuristic weapon systems you're talking about, this is one of the real issues of our time, where, and this isn't the weapons that you mentioned, but this is the one that plagues me the most. America has had this era of military drone superiority for the last number of years, where we've had these flying drones equipped with lethal weaponry, and we have taken advantage of that. Now, other countries have the same military drone technology. We're up to 30,000 known military drones in the hands of 95 different state and non-state actors. And what military drones enable you to do is enable your offensive capability to far outstrip defensive capability. Can you imagine what it would take to secure a US location against something the size of a flying vacuum cleaner? That's what these drones are. It's like 30,000 drones out there. They're essentially, it's like, hey, I've got this flying device, like this little helicopter. Can I just like strap some radioactive material to it? Can I like strap this to it? Can I strap that to it? And then how do you protect against that? So this is a really, really tough question for us all, because defending against those kinds of devices in a variety of theaters would require wholesale changes in our way of life in a way that's completely impractical. And so to your question, it's like, would you allow civilians to have these things? I think this is going to be a tough question too, because do you want civilians having access to off-the-shelf technology that enable you to do things that would be very, very hard for the government to protect against? Most of these technologies are fairly readily available. You can imagine what it would take. The goal has to be to try and restrain access to some of these materials that can take something the size of a flying vacuum and make it very, very damaging and destructive. So that's obviously radioactive materials of different kinds. Certainly anything that's fissile or can be made into some sort of something that's vastly destructive, chemical weapons, bioagents. It's a real problem. And to me, in a free country, you do not want to err on the side of trying to restrain everyone's ability to access these things. So what you want to do is home in on the things that actually can have very, very destructive effects and try and limit access to those. That was the first question of that type I've gotten. I sort of enjoyed it because I obviously worry about these things.
All right, well, I'd like to really see a united front among all the candidates and our supporters to beat Trump. And so along those lines, I'd love to see all the current candidates, those that have dropped out, in a future administration. So what might a Yang administration look like? And should someone else be the candidate, where might you see yourself fitting into someone else's cabinet?
Well, thank you for the question. I have to say one of the joys of running for president is becoming friends with the other candidates. I really like most all of them. They're earnest, patriots, public servants that want to do right. And I agree with you that we need to present a unified front to beat Donald Trump in the fall. I will 100% support whoever the nominee is, because job one has to be to beat Trump. I'm going to very briefly explain why I think I'm the best candidate to take on and defeat Donald Trump. One survey had 10% of Trump voters in New Hampshire saying that they would support me over Trump in the general. Another survey said 18% of college Republicans would choose me over Trump in the general.
Yep.
And you know who's figured out that I am the worst nightmare for Donald Trump in the general? Donald Trump. about every candidate in the field except for me. And he hasn't touched me for two reasons. One, he knows his followers kind of like me. Two, I'm better at the internet than he is. And the third reason is that most of his most potent attacks are what? You're a corrupt politician, you're a creature of DC, I'm like, da-da-da-da. Like, none of that stuff works on me. And we know he's thinking about this because one of his advisors was quoted in one of those closed-door meetings. Someone caught him on camera saying, we're worried about Yang. The internet, when people gamble money as to what outcomes are going to be, I'm a heavy favorite to beat Trump in the general election, more so than any other Democratic candidate. So these are the reasons why I think I'm the best candidate to take on and defeat Donald Trump. But I could not agree with you more that whoever is the nominee, we have to coalesce together and pull together. I would work with Corey, Kamala, Julian, like most about everyone that has been in the race, because at this point, you may not know this, but we actually have each other's cell phone numbers, we text each other. We're like, hey, you know, happy birthday, or whatever it is. Not really happy birthday, some other things. If I'm president, I would need to have a team of people that have deep relationships and experience in DC, because you need that to get things done. If there's someone else who's the president, I think my best value add would be as either vice president or someone who's helping manage some of these technology issues that, frankly, our government is way behind on. And one technology issue that I think is close to home for many of us, if you're a parent, you might be concerned that your kids are somewhat infatuated with their screens. And those effects are not great on their mental health in many, many contexts. To use myself as an example, I was a very introverted 12, 13-year-old kid. But when I got home, I could close the door and feel like I was alone. Our kids do not feel like they're ever alone. They can just take out the phone and see what their classmates are thinking. So this is having a very negative effect on their mental state. You're seeing record high levels of anxiety and depression. And you know who don't let their kids use these devices?
Rich people?
The folks in Silicon Valley who make the devices. You want to find an environment where there's like no screens, you just go out there. Because they know they have the smartest engineers in our country turning supercomputers into dopamine delivery devices for teenagers. So our country is way behind on helping manage that set of issues, and AI, and cybersecurity, and a lot of the tech issues that to me are some of the biggest concerns that we have in this country. And in an administration, I would like to help change that, because we can't be decades behind on these issues anymore.
Hi, thank you for being here today, and I really appreciate that I'm hearing a lot of things that I haven't heard from a lot of other candidates. But I have a question about the $1,000 a month universal basic income. So with college tuition going up to record levels, one of the causes of that is the availability of so much cheap money in all of, like, basically the market getting flooded with student loans. And so because there's so much money available for students to spend, that the schools can raise their tuition. Likewise with like the housing market, because there's cheap mortgage money, then housing prices can go up. So if everybody's getting $1,000 a month, how do you prevent that from any particular segment of the economy just kind of like sucking that up, and like maybe rents go up somewhere, or medical goes up somehow, or whatever?
I love this question so much. Why the heck has college gotten 2.5 times more expensive over the last number of years? Did it get 2.5 times better? Was there some quantum leap in quality? I mean, I laugh, but I've got 2 kids. Raise your hand again if you're a parent. If you're a parent, you're like, what the heck is going on? Like, how much is it going to cost? Like, I have 2 kids, I'm supposed to budget what? Like, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. And so, you're right that one of the contributing factors, all right, so check it out. The schools have the same business model, unfortunately, as the health insurance companies and the drug companies, where they just ratchet up the prices every year. So if you're a family, unfortunately, you feel like you have no choice but to pay. You're like, well, I'm not going to not send my kid to college, they want to go to college. And then our government says, don't worry about it, we've got these loans for you. So now we're up to $1.6 trillion in student loan debt. That first, why are the colleges more expensive? And I'm going to push one thing. Sure, the loans exist, but the loans are not what made the colleges raise the prices. You know what I mean? Then we look in and say, why are the colleges more expensive than they were years ago? Do you think hire more teachers? No. Do you think it's because they hire more, that they spend more on buildings and facilities?
No.
You would think so, but not really, it turns out. The two contributing factors are that they're getting less public aid from the states, so that they have to rush up prices. But the bigger one is that the administrator to student ratio has gone up 150%.
Yep.
These are not teachers, this is just administrators. They become very, very bureaucratically complex. And then they pass those costs along to families, and then we go to the government and say, give us the loans, please. So you have to work on getting those prices down in a variety of ways. Now, putting money into families' hands, to me, is positive, because right now we're dealing with the higher cost of education, and this would always help. But you have to work with the schools to say, look, we need to have your prices not just go up every year, because that's unsustainable. And then you need to try and push more kids towards vocational, technical, apprenticeship, these are set. Think about that gulf. We have to stop saying colleges for everyone and say that there are other things beyond college. This would also help cap the prices and get them under control. 41% of kids who are starting college are not finishing within 6 years. Does the school give them a refund? No, of course not. You know, like, so they also owe part of this $1.6 trillion. There's a similar story in healthcare where the health insurance companies ratchet up the prices every year, and we feel like we don't have a choice but to pay. It's breaking our back. So what we have to do is we have to go into the 3 core sources of inflation in American life right now, which are unfortunately the ones that make us most miserable: housing, education, and healthcare. And say we need to help get these prices under control. But these prices are not going out of control because we're rich. They're not. They're going out of control because the markets are not functioning properly, because we feel like we don't have a choice in the matter and there's no competition. If you put this money, so I'm going to run through this just because it's kind of fun. I'm your president a year from now. Thank you to Dubuque. You start getting $1,000 a month at some point thereafter, then you are in a good mood, you decide to celebrate. What is the restaurant you would go to celebrate here in Dubuque? What's it called? Raisin? All right, Raisin. Trisha has Raisin on the line. Good. How much does dinner at Raisin cost? 20 bucks? 25? I don't know what it is. 100. More than that? Oh my gosh, that's the wrong restaurant, Trisha. That's the wrong restaurant for example. I'm going to say it's $50 just for fun. So you decide to go to Raisin, and then you get there, and instead of $50, the dinner is going to cost $80. How do you respond? You're like, wait a minute, this was $50 last week. Like, what the heck happened here? Just because you have money in your hands doesn't all of a sudden make you cost insensitive. You're still going to go like hunting for a value. So as long as you're still price sensitive and there's still competition between firms, prices should stay under control. The problem is in these markets where you're not allowed to compete. So that's education, that's healthcare, and that's to some extent housing. So we have to help contain inflation in those markets, but in the other markets you should not see massive price increases. And as one data point in this direction, do you all remember voting for the $4 trillion bailout of Wall Street 12 years ago? No. If you had a choice between voting for the $4 trillion bailout of Wall Street or keeping Americans in their homes, we all would have chosen to keep Americans in their homes. So when we talk about some of these numbers and putting money into people's hands, to me, we've been servicing the banks and the companies for a long time. And it's common sense that if you put the money into our hands, it would actually be much more effective than if we gave it to these banks and financial institutions. But I raise this in part because some of you might think if you put this money out, then you'll see inflation. There was no inflation, and we printed $4 trillion for the banks, and we're talking about a lower amount of money in this context. So you should not see inflation across the board.
Last question.
Hi there. Thank you for coming today. My question is, what are your thoughts on Electoral College electing the president versus the popular vote?
I love this question too. Dubuque has such great questions. I'm so happy. All right. I understand the frustration among people who voted against Trump, like I did, that the Electoral College determined who the president was and not the popular vote. Because common sense seems to suggest, well, if you have more people vote for X than Y, then X should win. But here's the world that we live in. It would require a supermajority of states to change the Electoral College, and that would involve many, many states shooting themselves in the foot and saying, I want to have less say in the election than I currently have, which is a non-starter. No one's going to do it. And I would suggest that these rules have been in the Constitution since day one. And so if you're the losing side of that set of rules that everyone has understood very clearly, it's very hard to make the case that now we need to change the rules because you look like you just can't win by the rules that as they're written, and so you want to change them. That just feels like the wrong approach. You'd have to win a race and then say, hey, now that we won, like, let's change them and come together. So here's what here's the other thing about, if you had a system where it was just popular vote, where would the candidates campaign?
California, New York.
We would only campaign in major metro areas because it would reach more people, more votes, and in that case, it's just like a vote's a vote. And so I would just hang out on the coasts, and I would maybe not come so much to rural areas. So there are real problems with getting rid of the Electoral College. One, it's unfeasible. Two, it would permanently advantage urban areas over rural areas. And I would suggest that urban areas have enough advantages over rural areas, and you don't need to stack more on top of it. So here's what I propose, and I think you're going to like it. I think everyone's going to like it. All right. There are certain states that presidential candidates campaign in much more than others because you're swing states. Iowa is one of them. There are, depending upon the election, let's call it somewhere between like 6 and 10 states that you consider as battlegrounds. Then we ignore the other states unless there are some rich people in those states, and then we just show up to ask them for money, and then we go back to the battlegrounds. That's the way this process works. All right. Now that stinks for a lot of Americans because you never actually get campaigned to. If you're in Arkansas, Mississippi, Vermont, like just no one cares about you. So here's how we change it. We say that you get allocated electors proportionally to the vote in your state. So this is not like a throw out the Electoral College. This is everyone still has electors, but instead of it all being winner take all, like you get the fraction that you got in that state. So this does not advantage urban areas over rural areas because you still have the electoral system, but it does create an environment where I could campaign anywhere because if I just move the margin in Vermont or Arkansas or Mississippi, that actually might get me an extra electoral vote. And so all of a sudden it opens up the country to campaign in a way that the current system does not. And this is actually something you could sell to everyone because it's bipartisan. The states that never get campaigned to would be like, I would like to see a presidential candidate every once in a while. I'd like my people to see some political ads. Kidding. Sorry, I thought that was funny. I feel for you in Iowa. I can't turn on the TV without seeing one of us. I feel bad about that. Now, so this is electoral college reform that people can get behind. I think it's unproductive for Democrats to talk about abolishing the Electoral College because it would only happen if literally 15 states got up one morning and said, we don't like having an influence over who becomes president. We don't like having people care about our people because, we're in rural areas. We'd rather you all leave us alone. Like, the odds of that happening are literally zero. And I like to keep solutions in a zone where you can actually see them getting some level of support where you can pass them.
Thank you, everyone. And we're still going to chat with the press. If you want a selfie, please slide up to the right.
Thank you, Dubuque. We need you to caucus for us on February 3rd and fight for a vision of the future that we can actually be proud of and leave to our kids. I hope you're with us. Let's win this thing. Let's make history.
All right, guys. What we're asking for right now is your financial support. Andrew Yang needs your help. This is a campaign powered by small dollar donations. We need your support now. Please donate to Andrew Yang's presidential campaign at yang2020.com/ No, Yanked, I keep saying it wrong. Yang2020.social/livestream. It's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. If you have $1, please donate it to Andrew Yang's campaign. If you have $5, please donate it to Andrew Yang's campaign. If you have $10, please donate it to Andrew Yang's campaign. And remember, if you can't afford to donate, you can still help the campaign by going to yang2020.com/call and yang2020.com/text. Please donate whatever you can right now using the link in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like more live streams, show your love for the YouTube channel using the Secure Act Blue link in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. We need your donations. Thank you so much for watching.
Actually, I did.